for having me. I was saying to Joshua earlier, these are my favorite kind of conversations, the chance to just share a little bit about my work and the story of where we came from, and to connect with other people who are thinking about community formation in their own space and what it means to be in right relationship with other people is deeply meaningful work to me. And so I'm excited about the chance to learn alongside you over the next hour. So my name's Scarry. I'm calling in from right outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia, and I am the community director of the People's Supper and the community manager of the dinner party. And so I'm going to tell you the story of the dinner party and how that then became also the story of the People's Supper. And then we'll just chat for a bit. So the dinner party, our work is centered on connecting 20 and 30 somethings who have experienced significant loss to navigate life after loss in community. So we understand that ours is the work of turning some of our hardest and most isolating experiences into ones that are marked by community support, candid conversation, and forward movement, using the age-old practice of breaking bread. So we think a lot about our work as really sinking into the reality of the problem of loneliness in our time and isolation. And so some stats we kind of anchor our work in and remind ourselves of is that in 1985, 1 in 10 Americans said that they had no intimate with whom to discuss important matters, and that number was 1 in 4 by 2004. We also pay pretty close attention to the American suicide rate and its significant increase over the last 15 years, and how it's not only the increase in the suicide rate, it's the reality that a significant number of those people who have lost their life to suicide never had a mental health diagnosis. So for us, we think a lot about loneliness and how we live in a moment of increased connectivity and increased isolation, and how might we create community space for people to really connect with one another on a really human level, and spaces where we can be our full human selves. So one of the ways we think about the dinner party then is, what are the kind of compound forms of isolation in our time? So I think it was 6 years ago, there was a group in LA a group of friends who realized they had all lost a parent, and they were in their 20s, and they were the only people they knew who had had that experience at that particular age. And grief support groups are usually folks who are over 40s and 50s, and there's a lot of grief support for folks who are younger than 20. And so they decided, hey, let's sit down for dinner and just talk about the people we've lost. And to your point, Josh, to honor our ancestors, right? To bring them to the conversation and to process what that means for us. And then they realized they might have been onto something. And so they started to develop a model to connect people all over the country with tables of others in their 20s and 30s who have experienced significant loss. And so now we have active about 4,000 people all over the world in dinner parties. So it's more than 400 tables. And the way that it works is people sign up online to join the table and sign up to host. We train hosts on how to kind of welcome people to their space and really anchor conversations around loss and life after. And then we connect 10 people to a table, around 10, it varies, to be able to connect over time and navigate life after loss. And so when we're thinking about connection, we're thinking about as much as we're able, again, kind of back to that compound forms of isolation piece, how do we make sure that nobody's the only of their kind at their table? So the only person of their identities, or the only person with their loss experience. So either who they lost or how they lost them. So in cities like Washington, D.C., where we have a wait list of more than 300 people, it's pretty easy to make sure that if you're showing up at your table as that, you'll have somebody else at the table who reflects your identity or your loss experience. So that is kind of the arc of the dinner party, and our bread and butter are those kind of table gatherings. And a big conversation in dinner party world over the last couple of years is, how might we translate this model and the methodology and the ways we've been able to scale it up towards other forms of isolation. So the People's Supper is a project of what's now called the Dinner Party Labs, which is seeking to kind of answer that exact question, that other forms of isolation, that the way that we're realizing the power of relationships for social change. So in the wake of the 2016 election, where America was feeling a really acute pain of polarization in our country, the People's Supper was born. And the initial intention was to gather people for a 100-day campaign, that in the first 100 days of Trump's presidency, there would be 100 suppers in people's homes all over the country for folks across lines of political difference to gather with people in their communities they might not otherwise meet. And now our work has shifted, if our being here is any sort of spoiler that we didn't end after the 100 days, our work has shifted pretty significantly towards, instead of, we're realizing the issue isn't usually political polarization in the abstract. It's usually that there's already some underlying thing that then politics makes an even bigger problem. And so we work with community partners all over the country around the questions of what needs healing here, or who needs to be in a relationship that isn't. And so that for us looks like a lot of different things. It's always anchored in community partnerships, and we kind of say that we bring the expertise on how we gather folks and how we move people towards getting at the heart of a real issue and moving through it together. And the partner brings the expertise on the people in their community. So some of the kind of highlights of that work have been my favorite initiative we worked on last year. We worked, this is a lot of information I'm throwing at you at once, but last year we worked with Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie was named in the study done by USA Today the worst place in the country for African Americans to live. And so their mayor's office hired us to work on a 6-month series with them. And essentially what we did was we moved 80 participants of across racial and ethnic lines through a 6-month series of suppers to kind of get at the reality of our experience in Erie and what is it, what are the kind of particulars of racial inequity in this place. And the mayor's office had asked those 80, after moving through a series of people's suppers, to come up with ideas to make Erie more equitable that the mayor's office committed before the series to take on. So it was an interesting exploration in how might we anchor national issues in the real stories of the particular people and the particular manifestation of those issues in local communities in order to create systemic change. So that is like one example of people's supper work, though it looks different all the time. We worked with USC, University of Southern California. They had a group of educators throughout LA who realized they were much more competitive than they were collaborative. So we moved them through a people's supper to kind of get at that for the sake of bettering education together in LA. It also looks like places like Creede, Colorado, which is a super small town, who their issues aren't really political until social media and posts about political polarization make their local community issues huge, because suddenly they're seeing these other things that their neighbors might be saying about them that they didn't really realize before. And so to date, we've had at least 10% of Creede residents sit down for dinner with one another across really significant political lines in order to kind of think about what it means to live into the values that Creede professes about being a small town that takes care of one another, right? So some of it's the thinking about who we long to be and who we say we are and how might we work towards that together. So that is a lot. Those are kind of the most bird's eye view arc of both of those bodies of work. And so, yeah, I think we continue to sit in the questions of isolation or what needs healing here. I think our work has shifted around paying attention to how do we move away from people being able to use people's supper as like a checkbox for proving I can sit down with a diverse group, or for tokenization. Like those questions remain really live for us. Like, how do we maintain the integrity of this work by being willing to shift it a little bit and shift how we train people or who we do and don't invite to sit down for a gathering, and what we call our partners to as they are working in this as well. And so I feel like we sit with a lot of intention and care about kind of the heart of taking really good care of people, and as far as it depends on us, doing no harm, and protecting those who are perpetually marginalized. And so those things at the center of what maintains the integrity of our work means that we're kind of continually learning and shifting and thinking about how to do this better and better. So that was a lot. I hope that that was what you're looking for, Joshua. That was a lot of information I threw at you. That's basically the big arc of the work.